Hi, it's Katrina. From ghost ships to a real yellow submarine, here are 8 of the most mysterious abandoned sea vessels. Number 8. The Carroll A Deering. Have you ever read the books A Series of Unfortunate Events? If you have, you might see some similarities here. The Carroll A Deering had a very odd set of events happen to it before it was found abandoned on the shores of North Carolina without a clue as to where the crew went. The Deering was a commercial schooner. It was known to transport coal, among other things, and had just dropped off a load of coal in Rio de Janeiro. On its way back, though, things got weird. First, during a routine stop in Barbados, something went wrong with the first mate of the ship. He was arrested on the charge of making threats to the captain. It all got settled and the ship continued its course. As it got close to North Carolina, someone on the ship contacted the Cape Lookout Lightship with a warning that they had lost their anchors, which meant that if they made port, they'd have no way to keep the ship from drifting. But they continued their journey anyway. Fast forward to when the ship was last seen and it ran aground at Cape Hatteras. But when people went to check on things, the crew and everything they owned was gone. No trace of them on the ship. Where did they all go? Many have wondered, but there has never been a clear answer. Some think it was pirates or some other kinds of thieves, but those theories have left more questions than answers. A few people feel the Bermuda Triangle is to blame since they were in Barbados, which is near it, but the triangle ends near Florida, and North Carolina is much farther than that. Only the ocean knows what happened to this abandoned vessel. Number 7. The Suicide Club. Yeah, if this is your nickname, you know that you're screwed. The time was World War I, and the British Navy was dealing with a small crisis in regards to their submarines. Submarines are important scouts and are a great element of surprise during wartime. To give them a greater advantage, they needed to be faster so they could scout ahead of a fleet, submerge, and attack the enemy. Enter the K-class submarine. In order to make it faster, a naval architect decided to use steam to power the subs. Steam engines in submarines are a terrible idea. They were humongous and were fast, but they took forever to actually submerge and were easily attacked by enemy ships. They dove too fast and there were too many holes, so there were gas leaks, explosions, fires, etc. They even crashed into each other during battle. The military refused to disclose what happened until certain crew members had died and couldn't try and sue. The kind of good news is that only 18 were ever made, 6 of which were sunk due to collision accidents. K was for calamity, and it was so bad that whoever was put on these submarines were dubbed the Suicide Club, because you most likely weren't coming back from the adventure. It's interesting to note now, though, that every nuclear-powered submarine at sea today is a steamship. Submarine technology has come a long way. Number 6. High Aim 6. Here's a strange one for you. The High Aim 6 was a Taiwanese ship that was found completely abandoned. In 2003, the Australian Navy found the 80-foot vessel that was going full throttle. The ship had plenty of fuel and supplies to keep the crew going. There was also a hold full of valuable tuna that they had most likely gone out to fish to bring back. The clothes and documents were all in their place, but where was the crew? A massive rescue mission was launched to try and find them, but nothing came of it. Everyone started calling it the ghost ship. People who had been working with boats all their lives said that they had never seen anything like it. There were reports that the ship's engineer had made phone calls from his cell phone while the crew were all in Bali, but nothing came of it. They left Indonesia and went fishing. When the owner didn't hear from the captain again, he reported it to the Coast Guard. What was going on? Was there a mutiny? If so, why were their valuables left on board? There is a theory that the boat belonged to people smugglers, or that they had been attacked by pirates. The radio was missing, but pirates would have taken the boat and the expensive tuna. If they were murdered, where is the evidence? Where are they? Nobody will say, and the mystery remains. Number 5. The Unsinkable Joyita. Many ships that have been built to be unsinkable have proven to be just the opposite. And I'm not talking about the Titanic, but the MV Joyita, a ship with a much more mysterious history. The MV Joyita disappeared from view in 1955. The small ship had cargo and 25 people on board. It was sailing in the South Pacific when it simply vanished, and everyone assumed it was just lost at sea. When it didn't arrive for its scheduled port date, people started to look for it. 5 weeks later, it was found just drifting. It was clear that this wasn't a normal accident. The crew and passengers were gone, but they weren't the only things missing. 4 tons of cargo on the ship were unaccounted for. Furthermore, the radio on the ship was tuned to the emergency distress channel. All lifeboats were gone, and some windows were smashed. Pirates? A raid that ended in bloodshed? Some said that they had come upon some Japanese fishermen doing something that they shouldn't have been, and so they attacked them. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. Number 4. St. Patrick. The Bering Sea is known as one of the most treacherous waters in the world. It's the setting of the show Deadliest Catch, where brave crab fishermen fight the fierce winds, waves, and freezing oceans to get rich hunting for king crab. However, there are many tales of ships that have sunk in these waters, and one of the most haunting tales was of the scallop vessel, the St. Patrick. The St. Patrick was on its way to its fishing grounds when a massive storm hit the ship. While it started off as normal, the ship soon took a wave that crippled the vessel, taking out the engine and its electrical systems. Fearing the worst, the 12-man crew fled the vessel. Unfortunately, the crew wasn't fully able to prepare for this, and only 9 of the 12 were able to get on their survival suits. Even with the survival suits, not all of them made it. After 24 hours of drifting in the water, only 2 members of the crew were rescued by the Coast Guard. Why is this so haunting? Well, when the 2 were rescued, they learned the hard truth. The St. Patrick was still afloat. Despite a massive storm with winds and waves that would have sunk most ships, this one stayed upright, meaning that if they had just stayed on board, they would have had a terrifying experience, but all the crew would most likely still be alive. The story was so powerful that it was not only told on Deadliest Catch, but it was made into a movie called Deadliest Sea. Number 3. The Yellow Submarine. I appreciate all the Beatles fans who get that reference. And there was, in fact, a real yellow submarine. If you go to Coney Island and take a look at its creek, you'll notice that there's a lone submarine sticking out of the water. The whole creek is a ship graveyard full of burned and rotting ribs of old ships. But the Yellow Submarine is the only sub there. People have long wondered what it's doing there and why it's in the creek. Well, it's a tale of intrigue, lost treasure, and a man who went a little too cheap in an attempt to get rich. In 1956, there was a ship called the Andrea Doria, which was a well-known cruise liner. A lot of rich people were happy to take the ship on various journeys or just to get away. Sadly, though, the ship sank, taking the lives of nearly 50 people. But what also went down with the ship were a lot of artifacts that could make you rich. The only catch was you had to go get it yourself. If you get it, you keep it. Enter Jerry Bianco, a shipyard worker who wanted to go after the Andrea Doria. It took him 4 years of work, but he eventually built his own submarine out of scrap metal. And yes, it was yellow, but not because of the Beatles song, but because the paint was cheap. He called it the Quester 1. Speaking of cheap, to get a good deal on getting the sub into the water, Bianco made sure that every piece of non-vital weight was stripped from the ship, which meant it had to go a certain way into the water, but it tipped sideways and got stuck in the muck. He was unable to raise enough money to recover it, and Mr. Bianco had to give up his dream of looking for treasure. His buried submarine is a sad reminder of what could have been. Number 2. The Pearl of Submarines. When you think of submarines, you often think of them as a military instrument, especially in World War II and the Cold War. But it might surprise you to learn that submarines were actually used long before that for non-military expeditions, and one was lost to history for nearly 150 years. In Panama, there were stories about a beached submarine that would appear during low tide. An archaeologist named Jim Delgado was in the area and knew the story, so he decided to look into it. When he found it, he noticed the sub was American. So how did it get to Panama? Researching the answer took years, but eventually he found it in the New York Times from 1886. This submarine was made in the 19th century, and it was actually one of the first successful submarines to be able to fully go underwater, a process that took quite a long time to perfect. The craft was made by Julius Carroll, a German-American who made the ship to do one thing: mine for pearls. Didn't see that one coming, did you? The ironic thing was that it was quite successful at its job, to the extent that it once harvested 10 tons worth of pearls in one trip, bringing in over $2,000, which back then was a fortune. Because this was one of the earliest submarines, some of the side effects of going so deep underwater weren't known, and many of the crew who went on these expeditions got decompression sickness, including Carroll himself. Many of them died. Deeming it too dangerous to use, Panama decommissioned the craft and left it in the water. Number 1. The Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was a ship from 1872 that was abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was actually a merchant ship of all things, so it being abandoned is a bit odd. But when you dive deeper, it gets even weirder. The ship was on its way to the Azores along with 7 crew members, the captain, and his family. A British ship called De Gratia found the Mary Celeste floating in the choppy seas and went to investigate. The ship was completely abandoned. But why? There was nothing wrong with it and no evidence of foul play. Everyone's belongings were still intact, and the cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol was all there. What's more, there was apparently 6 months' worth of provisions on board, so there's no way that it was starvation or lack of supplies that caused everyone to flee. So why did they? The crew of De Gratia was also invested in case they had something to do with it, but there was no evidence. In 1884, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a short story claiming that an ex-slave was seeking vengeance and had murdered everyone. Everyone was wondering what happened to the ghost ship and the family on board. The documentary The True Story of the Mary Celeste was also unable to offer a definite conclusion. The ship went on to have several different owners. The last captain ran it aground in Haiti to try to claim insurance on it, and he was accused of fraud. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!